From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin this evening with one of the major questions still unanswered, even though the Oliver North trial is over. Did the White House of Ronald Reagan intentionally prevent some critical documents submitted as evidence during the trial from being examined by Congress during its earlier investigation of the Iran-Contra affair? It is an issue that goes to the very core of how the system of government is intended to work. It is also a question of how well congressional investigators did their work. ABC's Britt Hume is in Washington.
Both Chairman David Boren of the Senate Intelligence Committee and Lee Hamilton of the House Intelligence Committee have said they will investigate whether a White House cover-up kept congressional Iran-Contra investigators from receiving documents which surfaced at the Oliver North trial. ABC News has learned, however, that the way the documents were handled suggests the committees may have simply overlooked them. The papers in question imply the Reagan White House planned a quid pro quo trade-off to give aid to Honduras in return for that country's assistance to the Contras. They also suggest then Vice President Bush may have been the emissary to Honduran President Suazo, telling him the aid was on the way. The president yesterday emphatically denied that charge and said he knew of no trade-off deal with Honduras.
The word of the President of the United States, George Bush, is there was no quid pro quo.
The documents that raised the charge were among those found in Oliver North's office when he was fired in 1986. They were placed under seal as evidence by independent counsel Lawrence Walsh. The FBI sifted North's files and was supposed to have provided Congress everything the Bureau gave the independent counsel. For reasons unknown, the FBI did not give the committees all the documents. But the committees had another way of getting them. The National Archives provided the committees an index of the documents. ABC News has learned the documents in question were in two separate folders, one called, quote, Honduran Support for the Resistance, the very subject of the alleged deal. The other folder was called Oliver North Chronological Files, February 1985. That month was at the height of the Iran-Contra affair. Congressional committee sources could not say why the two folders were not requested, except that committee investigators who ended up with 400,000 documents may have thought they knew all the information already. John Niels, the House Committee Counsel who handled the matter, insisted tonight that the Reagan White House was obliged to turn over the documents, whether they were specifically requested or not. But even he said that did not mean there was a cover-up. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
Members of the Oliver North jury could finally talk about the case today, why they found him guilty on some charges and not on others. And as they did, two things became fairly obvious. The 9 women and 3 men took their responsibility very seriously, and they are very relieved the trial is finally over. Here's our law correspondent, Tim O'Brien.
Today, the jurors answered reporters' questions about how they reached their historic verdict.
In the end, we were together. And after we came to our decision, we all cried.
Denise Anderson was the jury foreman.
I got into it just like when I work at my job. I feel for Oliver North. I feel for him. He's not a bad man.
North had admitted sending these misleading letters to Congress. The judge had said his defense that he was following orders shouldn't matter, but the jury still didn't convict him on these counts.
I'm not going to go to jail for what my boss writes. I put myself into his place on everything that he did. That's how I came up with my verdicts. And
some jurors said they gave less weight to the judge's narrow instructions than to simple fairness.
Because he was protecting people, protecting their lives. And we took all of that into consideration.
And Turner seemed persuaded by North's argument he was just a scapegoat.
And I just don't feel like they treated him fair. If anybody should get charged, it should start from the top man all the way down.
Although several jurors appeared sympathetic to North, some were openly critical of his secretary, Fawn Hall, for her part in the destruction of documents.
I think Fawn Hall should have been ashamed of herself for a lot of things that she was doing.
According to Earl Williams, at one point when the jury appeared deadlocked, juror Caswell Hartford suddenly got up and started to pray.
It was just a good, strong prayer, a good, strong, soul-stirring prayer.
This was evident that God was speaking to him. He started shaking, crying.
North was convicted of 3 felonies, and there were no second thoughts from the jury today, whose members expressed only satisfaction and relief.
When we turned in those decisions, all 12 of them, I felt that I had peace of mind.
Tim O'Brien, ABC News, Washington.
The jurors' belief that higher-ups knew what Oliver North was doing was supported by a document used in the trial and made public just today. It describes intelligence reports that North ordered to keep track of missiles that were sold to Iran in 1985. It also makes it clear they were part of an arms for hostages deal. 17 high-ranking government officials received those intelligence reports, including then Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger and CIA Chief William Casey. In a moment, Jim Wright defends himself by attacking the politics of Washington. And later in the broadcast on Derby weekend, it takes 4 legs to fly first class. And on this Friday, our Person of the Week, for one young man, a moment not to be missed.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Imodium AD.
What do you take for diarrhea? Ah, the old standby. If you're like most people, lots and lots of the old standby. Well, now there's something more advanced. Imodium AD, with a medicine now available without a prescription. So Imodium AD can often stop diarrhea with just 1 dose, instead of all the spoonfuls you may need of the leading remedy. 1 dose of Imodium AD. It can make your first attack of diarrhea your last.
The Audi 3-year test drive. 3 years of German style without the responsibilities of ownership. 3 years of German luxury with none of the scheduled maintenance costs. 3 eminently affordable years with the car you've always desired. Don't let a lease this impressive pass you by.
For more information, call 1-800-727-4800.
Now the Jim Wright story. The Speaker of the House was in friendly territory today. He was home in Fort Worth, Texas, where he told a Law Day audience that the accusations against him had little to do with ethics and everything to do with politics. Just down the road in Dallas, there were new accusations against the Speaker. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
Back among the Texans who sent him to Congress for 18 terms, Mr. Wright blamed all his problems on the cruel world of Washington.
When I became Speaker of the House 2 years ago, I just simply did not dream in my wildest expectations the degree to which this fact would make me a target for repeated personal attacks. Perhaps I was naive.
In fact, he's wise enough to know how seriously he's been wounded by the official charges and by other bad news, like today's report on his loss of $100,000 in a nursing home company that gave him favored treatment when it began to fail. That story was read by the chairman of the Ethics Committee, Julian Dixon.
I think it's fair to say that reports in the paper have given us more detail than we had before.
But the committee won't get into that until after its current inquiry into whether this Texan, M.D. Jaffe Jr., and his father helped arrange a sweetheart oil deal for the Speaker that brought him a quick $150,000 profit. Mr. Wright's speech today was titled Law and Ethics in America. And to his sympathetic audience, he insisted that while he's made a few mistakes, he's always adhered to the highest standards of both.
I'm fallible and mortal, prone to human error. But I have never done anything to dishonor you, and I never will.
But in Dallas today, a banker testifying in a federal trial said he was told in 1985 that in return for political contributions of $250,000 from savings and loan institutions, the Speaker would protect the Texas thrift industry in Congress. No comment yet from Mr. Wright. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
A federal judge today in El Paso, Texas, ordered the FBI to change the way it promotes its minority agents. He called the present system under which supervisors can ignore the recommendations of a career review board excessively subjective. Last September, the same judge ruled the FBI had discriminated against Hispanic agents. In economic news today, the unemployment rate rose 0.3%. Last month, it went to 5.3%. That's another sure sign the economy is slowing down. Economists are split over just how fast. Is it headed for a soft landing or recession? Wall Street isn't sure. The Dow Jones Industrials lost about 3 points today, and that brought the loss for the week to nearly 37 points. Vice President Quayle back in Washington after a 12-day tour of countries in the Pacific, met with the president today to discuss the trip in general and talk specifically about his last stop, a tour of the oil spill in Alaska. Before he left Alaska, the vice president said that Exxon needs to do more. Some people listening thought the same could be said about the federal government. ABC's Chris Bury is in Alaska tonight.
Vice President Quayle is the latest federal official to get his picture taken on an oil beach in Alaska.
We're committed to getting here until it's cleaned up.
But much of this mess could have been prevented, critics say, had substantial federal help arrived much earlier.
It's clear to me that the administration had just no sense of the severity of the problem and no sense of the urgency, and frankly, I think they're derelict.
Much-needed military equipment, including Army dredges capable of skimming up to 100 barrels of oil a minute, did not arrive until 4 weeks after the spill.
The federal response has been everything that anybody had ever anticipated it could be. The problem is we've got far more of a spill than anybody ever anticipated.
Now, 6 weeks after the disaster began, Prince William Sound resembles a battle zone.
It looks like the Second World War. Is this the Normandy invasion we got going?
The military mission is to support Exxon's mop-up. 42 Navy skimmers are chasing oil. 46 military aircraft haul cargo and personnel. This Navy troop ship houses hundreds of Exxon workers. All this is not cheap. Coast Guard Commandant Yost estimates the government is spending at least $1 million a day.
We've had a major federal effort, and Exxon will be billed for all of this.
USS Juneau, this is Valdez Communications Center, over.
The Coast Guard is coordinating federal forces, but Exxon's workers still scrub the rocks and clean the beaches. Progress is so slow, some politicians are demanding a federal takeover.
The government has the authority under current law to take charge, and they should have done so.
But the Coast Guard has only $4 million in its budget to clean up such disasters. A federal takeover, it says, would shut Exxon's checkbook and deny $17 an hour jobs to Alaskans. The main task for federal forces now is to keep the pressure on Exxon so the beaches are cleaned before they freeze in September. But all the military and civilian might now assembled here was not enough to stop oil from fouling new shores this week, the pristine coast of Katmai National Park, 500 miles from Prince William Sound. Chris Bury, ABC News, Valdez, Alaska.
Far above the Earth, it's been a perfect 24 hours for the 5 astronauts on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Last night, they launched the unmanned Magellan spacecraft, gently releasing it from the cargo bay. An hour later, Magellan's rocket booster propelled it on its long journey towards Venus. Today, a lighter moment is Mary Cleave. At 5'2", the shortest astronaut on any shuttle mission, couldn't reach the footholds designed to hold crew members still in the weightlessness of space. The shuttle commander, David Walker, provided a helping hand as Dr. Cleave continued her conversation with Mission Control. When we come back, a new threat to kill Americans from Iran. The State Department calls them outrageous.
I've never been that much of a cereal eater, or even breakfast for that matter. But then I read 2 or 3 different articles about oat bran. And I thought to myself, why would you not eat this stuff?
Medical reports have shown oat bran can be important to your good health. Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran has more oat bran than any leading ready-to-eat cereal.
You know, I get up 15 minutes early just so I can do this.
New Common Sense Oat Bran. A sensible thing to do.
Ford profiles in quality care.
At Ford, our goal is to build the highest quality cars and trucks in the world.
And to back those we sell today with coverage that protects you.
Like 6 years, 60,000-mile powertrain warranty.
With the optional Ford Extended Service Total Plan, you never pay more than $25 for a covered repair.
Our lifetime service guarantee means you'll never pay for a covered repair twice.
We're working with our dealers to help protect your investment.
At Ford Motor Company and our dealerships, quality is job one.
Checking in. We interrupt this transaction for a reminder.
So what's your approach?
There's one travel tip it pays to remember.
We've got one good option.
Choosing the card that actually pays you cash. Cash back for every charge. The Discover card.
Daddy loves you too.
job, everybody.
It pays to discover the card that pays you back.
There are not many countries in the world where a mere political speech can lead to live concern elsewhere. Iran is one of those countries. Today, Hashemi Rafsanjani, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, called for a new campaign of terror against the West. Now, how much the speech was designed to be taken seriously outside the country, or how much it was intended to further Rafsanjani's political fortunes inside Iran, is unclear. Here's ABC's John McWethy.
Speaker of the Parliament Rafsanjani called on Palestinians to hijack planes, blow up factories in Western countries, and to kill 5 Americans, Britons, or Frenchmen for every Palestinian who is killed on the West Bank and Gaza. Quote, "It isn't so hard to kill Americans or Frenchmen because they're all over the world," said Rafsanjani. "It's a bit difficult to kill Israelis." The speech, along with a huge demonstration, were all part of an Iranian gesture of solidarity with the Palestinians. The U.S. government was quick to respond.
The outrageous call to murder and terrorism by Iran's Speaker of the Parliament, Rafsanjani, marks another step backward for Iran.
U.S. embassies in Europe and the Middle East were notified of Rafsanjani's threats, and diplomats were warned to vary their daily routines to make themselves more difficult targets. Intelligence sources say Iranian agents, particularly those in Western Europe, have been more active since February when the Ayatollah Khomeini urged his followers to murder author Salman Rushdie. Rafsanjani, who is now running for president of Iran, was once the leading voice of moderation in his country. But with the Ayatollah Khomeini setting Iran on a course that is again bitterly anti-Western, analysts say for Rafsanjani to survive, he had to follow suit. The question is whether Iranian deeds will now follow the new rhetoric. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
President Bush has named a 14-member observer team to monitor the elections in Panama on Sunday. They may not observe very much. The Panamanian official says they don't have visas and may not be allowed out of the Panama Canal Zone. In Panama City, leaders of the opposition marched through the streets to protest again that General Noriega has rigged the election. When we come back, if you're the favorite in the Kentucky Derby, how do you get to Louisville? Very carefully.
When you grip a Delta faucet, you get more than just water. You get a chance to express yourself. Do it right now, and Delta will foot part of the bill. Up to $35 toward installation costs. Call toll-free by May 31st for rebate details and our free brochure. Because now's the time to grab the phone. And a great deal when you get a grip on yourself with Delta.
Hey, Phil, it's Ross. Your bid came in this morning. How soon can you come down for a face-to-face?
Hi, Philip. I need you here for some planning meetings. Let me know when you're
Business is tough. The least your airline can do is make sure that business travel isn't. That's why United offers the most service across the U.S. and the Pacific. United, rededicated to giving you the service you deserve. Come fly the friendly skies.
Hey, Phil, I sure hope you haven't unpacked your bags yet, pal.
Take the Audi 3-year test drive. Attain German performance without the investment of ownership. Acquire German innovation without the responsibilities of scheduled maintenance costs. Possess a car that's most desirable on a lease that's most affordable. The ride may last 3 years, but the offer is limited.
For more information, call 1-800-727-4800.
America, you're eating foods that are low in cholesterol. Or are you? If you like to cook these foods in butter, you have to add cholesterol. Or do you? Try cholesterol-free butter flavor Pam.
If you have an allergy and take Sudafed, there's something you should know. Contact maximum strength caplets stop the sneezing and itchy eyes that Sudafed can't.
Gesundheit.
Until there's a cure, there's contact.
Our next report is about traveling in style to the Kentucky Derby this weekend. It isn't really everybody's idea of style. After all, you pay a small fortune to fly for an hour and a half in a smelly plane, and you have to stand up all the way. However, here's ABC's Dick Schaap.
Easy Goer was getting ready to fly, getting ready to take off, getting ready to travel. Not just on the racetrack, but on this plane. an aging 727 that only a few hours earlier had been converted from a cargo shell to a flying barn, holding 18 tight-fitting, well-padded stalls designed to keep horses as still and calm as possible. Ideally, they don't even know they're flying.
And my favorite expression on horses, they're more perishable than strawberries. It takes 3 days for strawberries to go bad in a horse, 1 second.
Easy Goer, the odds-on favorite to win the Kentucky Derby, is a good flyer. He followed his final New York workout with a brisk pre-flight shower.
You got the door, Brian?
Trainer Shug McGahee saw to it that Easy Goer packed properly, brought his own equipment.
How much more stuff do you got?
His own hay on the van that would take him to the plane. Everything except a broom. Horsemen consider it bad luck to travel with a broom. Besides, there is a man on the plane whose job is to sweep. When the plane left New York for Kentucky, Easy Goer went first class, a $7,500 ticket entitling him to the only double stall on board. Which is more valuable, Easy Goer or the airplane?
Easy Goer. You could buy about 3 airplanes for what the price of this horse costs.
Only 4 hours after he left his stall in New York, Easy Goer settled in at Churchill Downs, the center of attention. The favorite to become the first Triple Crown champion in more than a decade. He is already off to a flying start. Dick Schaap, ABC News, Louisville.
In a moment, our person of the week.
With its 24-valve V6 engine, double overhead cams, and 220 horsepower, the new Ford Taurus SHO isn't for everyone. In fact, only a select number will experience this sport interior and performance suspension. The new limited production Ford Taurus SHO. Power in the hands of a fortunate few.
Get 2.9% financing or $750 cash bonus on 89 Ford Taurus.
Good friends and good food, but my stomach aches. My party and my Lanta too.
Phone calls, deadlines, stomach complaints, my job, and my Lanta too.
Circles and turns while my stomach burns. My trip, my Lanta too.
Double strength my Lanta 2 with nearly double the acid neutralizing power of any leading regular strength brand. The strength it takes to get on with your life.
And my life takes my Lanta too.
Your wood trim is going. Your paint is why. Because most premium paints aren't formulated to stop moisture damage. And before you know it, your wood trim is gone. You need Rust-Oleum Wood Saver paint. Formulated with Teflon and other ingredients, it forms a superior barrier to resist moisture. So don't wait. Replace your paint. Or you could replace your wood.
An international mystery. Some of NATO's brightest minds, victims of gruesome and unnatural deaths. Plus, the U.S. court system on trial. Appeals, delays, destroying the lives of victims and their families. Watch 2020 tonight.
And finally this evening, our person of the week. Our teenager, actually. A young man who has had a week that he will not forget in a hurry. How to introduce him? Well, the dictionary defines prodigy as a young person so gifted as to inspire wonder. Enter Gil Shaham.
I couldn't believe it. I still can't quite believe it. It'll take a couple of weeks before I really digest the whole thing.
It was the kind of moment a young musician lives for. As he warmed up minutes before he was to go on the London stage, he still couldn't quite believe that he was about to fill in for the great Itzhak Perlman, who had suddenly taken ill. Only a couple of days earlier, Gil had been taking an English test at his high school in New York. His agent had called to say that Perlman was sick. We can imagine it happening this way. You know, kid, Perlman's got an ear infection. You know his solos. Can you catch the next plane to London? Can you do it, kid? Why, this is the stuff movies are made of. Remember?
Keep your feet on the ground and your head on those shoulders of yours and go out and saw you. You're going out a youngster, but you've got to come back a star.
And that's what happened. London's tough music critics said he was just brilliant.
There were many people who cancelled when Itzhak could not come, who I'm sure will be very disappointed that they were unable to be present that night.
Michael Tilson Thomas had conducted the London Symphony.
He's a great fella. He's a wonderful, soulful, already brilliantly accomplished player. It's a great joy to play with him.
The violin came so naturally to Gil Shaham that his very first teacher believed he knew how to play it even before he touched one. He was born in Champaign, Illinois, where his father, who is an astrophysicist, was working at the time. When Gil was only 1, the family moved back to their native Israel. As a very small child, Gil picked up his father's violin, but his mother was determined there would be no squeaking in the house. Gil was adamant and refused to talk to his parents until his mother relented.
I think my brother played the piano and I wanted to be different, or something like that.
He finally began lessons when he was 7. He never squeaked, and 3 years later made his debut with the Jerusalem Symphony. The reviews were stunning. By the time he was a teenager, it was clear that he must come to New York and the famous Juilliard School of Music. So the whole family came. And today, to make a short story shorter, he will be in even greater demand on the concert stage all over the world. Last night, he was his usual fidgety self as he prepared to play with the Phoenix Symphony.
I always get nervous, though, before I play.
And besides, he said, he wasn't all that comfortable with Paganini's Violin Concerto No. 1. He could have fooled us. There isn't that much more to our story. A good kid with an extraordinary gift, who the critics believe will one day be like the great virtuoso whose shoes he stepped into in London, and who didn't flinch when opportunity knocked.
My primary sort of commitment is to violin and to improve and to get better. I think I'd like to go on playing the violin, maybe make a living out of it.
And so we choose 18-year-old Gil Shaham. We have seen on occasion that to be gifted and young is sometimes also to be burdened. So much attention, so much pressure, so many pitfalls. And so his modesty is particularly refreshing. We wish him well. That's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good weekend and good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.